Hello, everyone, and welcome to our event today. My name is Sheena Smith, and when I'm not being a webinar pilot, I'm the VP of Client Services here at SpendMatters. If you've joined us on a webinar in the past, you may have noticed that we've recently switched webinar platforms. Please take some time to explore our LinkedIn communities and some of the other assets we've provided here to entertain you. If you have any technical questions, please be sure to send them my way using the Q&A panel. Speaking of questions related to actual subject matter, do not be shy. Send them my way and I'll ask them live of our presenters during the event. Quick introduction to SpendMatters if you're not familiar with us. We are the leaders in the procurement and supply chain space. We publish every single day across vertical, across category, and keep everyone from Fortune 50 companies to students in the supply chain program at Michigan State in the know on procurement, supply chain, and beyond. Real quick, we're such geeks about procurement technology that we decided to partner with the Institute for Supply Management to throw our own conference later this year. If you're interested in joining us for the very first ever Global Procurement Tech Summit, it's going to be in Baltimore on March 14th through 16th, a chance to rub shoulders with some of the great technology firms in the industry, some of your peers, and some of our SpendMatters analysts as well. Now, how can procurement people capture value from today's historically low energy market? That's where our experts step in. So I'm pleased to introduce SpendMatters Chief Research Officer Pierre Mitchell and Insight Sourcing Group's VP of Enterprise Energy Solutions, Tommy Greer. Hi, Pierre. Hi, Tommy.
Hi, Sheena.
Hello.
And thanks, everyone, for attending. Really excited about today's session just because we get to get a great brain pick with Tommy and learn a lot about what he and Insight are doing in this market. It's a very complex spend area and one that has a lot of opportunities. So I'm going to set the stage for really just no more than 3 to 4 minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tommy, who's going to take us through the rest of the content. So with that, I'm going to let Tommy introduce himself and also just talk a little bit about what we're going to cover here in the meat of the webcast.
Great. Thanks, Pierre. As Pierre mentioned, my name is Tommy Greer, and I currently manage Insight Sourcing Group's dedicated energy practice. Of course, Insight Sourcing Group is a strategic sourcing organization that really covers, a number of different categories, with energy just being, one of many. So in terms of my background, I've really spent my entire career in the energy industry. I actually started out with Atmos very early on, spent about 11 or 12 years there in the natural gas industry. And as the market started to deregulate, I became a little more interested in the consulting side of the business. So I spent several years helping to build a supply and demand side management organization at GE and also at Accenture through a couple of different acquisitions. So throughout that career, I've worked a lot with end users similar to those on the call today to, of course, help them manage their energy spend. So just one other note before we just give a brief overview of the topics today. And just kind of seeing the participant list, I just want to make sure that everyone knows we're going to try to balance the discussion for those that are dedicated, energy stakeholders versus those that may have lots of responsibilities and energy is just one of them. So it's not going to be this complex, risk management discussion, but really more of an overview of, a comprehensive approach with some emphasis on, some things you can do in a historically low energy market. So just briefly, those things are, we'll talk about, 4 ways to reduce costs through a comprehensive energy strategy, which is really focusing not only on how to optimize or reduce your supply side costs, but in parallel looking for targeted ways to reduce consumption and demand. We'll take a quick look at the regulatory landscape, to look at what most of you have traditionally deemed addressable spend, whether it be in electric or natural gas, deregulated and regulated markets, and all those things in between. Also, a quick example of, opportunistic energy procurement when the markets are at historical low, and the idea being to proactively monitor and manage that energy as buying opportunities present themselves. And then finally, coupling that with some targeted low-cost, no-cost energy efficiency and demand-side management opportunities that, once again, allow you to also reduce consumption and demand as you optimize that cost per unit. So Pierre, with that, I'll let you take over from there.
Thanks, Tommy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, so just real quick. One thing I just, in thinking about what I was going to, just some of the upfront slides to kind of set things up, I just want to take a bit of a different tack. I think one of the things I wanted to touch on was, since we had talked a lot about, since we started this discussion, Gina mentioned our Global Procurement Technology Summit, the whole area around the internet and cloud computing and digital, it really is a big deal. It's impacting every single part of the market, including, the energy market with regards to energy management solutions and sensors and the Internet of Things. And but just more broadly, I mean, go to any airport and look at the number of people vying for limited outlets to power their cell phones, smartphones, and you can see that there's certainly being a lot of energy that's being consumed. Coming from silicon and based devices, and whether it's up in a data center or whether it's down in terms of what's sitting in our handsets or on our desktops, there's certainly an increasingly amount of energy that is being consumed, in the digital realm, and you can really see that just on the demand side, but also just in terms of where the costs are and the projections around data center energy costs and how it breaks down. And so, energy costs are really coming. It's not just something that is for energy-intensive manufacturing industries. It is something that really, there is a fair amount of spend really for any organization. And if you kind of, follow the money and like the TV show The Wire there, you got to go where the money is. Certainly there is some opportunities that can be had on some of the demand side. But just, really going upstream and looking at the overall energy supply chain and seeing to what extent you can get more bang for your buck with, with your utility spend, is something that there is certainly a lot of interest in. And for example, this is an actual, client of mine who, and they were kind of looking at this, and it was really as simple as senior management saying, all right, going to procurement saying, hey, go find some savings here and, go negotiate with the utilities. And by the way, it's going to be a challenge because, you have there's some of these regulated markets, and here they showed, an example of their operating company spend breakdown and some of the kind of spend metrics that they had at the OpCo and at a site level. So, while at a site level you might say, well, $270,000, it's decent money, but is it a spend that any one, plant manager or site manager is going to really be able to address? And that's really where you do have to take a strategic view of this category that really is complex. And, energy is a bit of a super category. There's a lot that goes in there. There's an entire supply chain, that set of supply chains that make it up. And, if you look at all the things on the left in terms of what makes it complex internally, you can certainly see it exhibits really these types of, characteristics. And I'm not going to really go through all of them, but anybody who's managed energy spend really can recognize that. And then over on the right, some of the external bullets, external factors, it is a high-risk category. You definitely need to literally keep the lights on and keep the plants running and keep the facilities running. It's also one where there's increasing regulatory complexity. It's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of bargaining power here, and at least assumed bargaining power that people think that the suppliers have, which is what we're going to hear Tommy talk about, challenging some of those assumptions. And it's an area where the information is not always really easily available, and that is where third-party sourcing providers of all sorts can really help companies get their arms around this, and ultimately that's going to help procurement evolve its value prop, beyond just supply assurance, which you have to have, and increasingly more towards, driving out cost wherever you can and waste, and then that leads to overall spend reduction and demand management, demand optimization, and finally value management. So there might be some things that you're looking at around sustainability or, other types of initiatives that are really important around, risk reduction and things like that. So those are certainly kind of key requirements that have to be, considered as well. So that sets the stage, and I'm going to turn this over to Tommy, who's going to really dive into some kind of key levers here and strategies that you can use in managing the spend. So Tommy, take it away.
All right, thanks, Pierre. Yep. So one of the areas that we wanted to focus on a little bit are really the four primary levers that really make up an enterprise-wide energy management program that's driven by sustained savings. So, of those four, first and foremost is your ability to capture your utility bill information and really get your arms around your energy spend. So whether that's just simply capturing some of the details from an invoice to loading all of this information into a very robust energy information management system that can do anything from benchmark facilities, to track your carbon footprint, to generate hundreds of different reports. And there are lots of sort of providers out there, and many of you will likely be utilizing them now. But part of that is also the ability to audit the invoices for billing errors and misapplications, and then even processing and paying them on your behalf. But the whole point here is that it's very important to have access to accurate, detailed information so you can more effectively source your energy, analyze rates, and do all those things that ultimately can generate value or savings. If you look at the second lever, I would guess that most of you on the call today, this is where you're spending the majority of your effort. It's, of course, the purchasing of energy in deregulated markets where you have choice. And, of course, typically you look at the price risk management aspect of this, which is, managing the volatility, or even simply as just, timing to market considerations. But the one sort of point that I like to make here is that there's a lot more value in proactively managing your procurement on an ongoing basis as opposed to a one-time procurement event. And so we'll talk about that here in a minute as we go through an example. And then the third lever, regulated rate optimization, that really applies to, for most clients, it's in the neighborhood of about 2/3 of your electricity spend, where you don't have choice, you're a price taker from the utility, and most are familiar and aware of this concept, but very few put much time and effort into it. So what I'm sort of here to say is that there are ample opportunities to reduce your costs in these regulated markets by simply looking at alternate rates that are more economical than the ones you're on, looking to qualify for rates you don't ordinarily qualify for, potentially negotiating special rates for contracts. So, all of those, are potential opportunities for you, but usually it has something to do with time of use rates, which is all about when and how you consume your energy. And then finally, demand side management. We talk about optimizing, reduce your costs on the supply side. Well, we also recommend that you really look at a very targeted approach to, for potentially, operational improvements through the metering and monitoring of these assets, coupled with energy efficiency and demand side, limiting or peak shaving or even software solutions, where ultimately you're tackling both simultaneously in an integrated way, where you're reducing your cost per unit and reducing consumption and demand at the same time. So the next slide here really is just to kind of highlight the complexity of the energy markets in terms of the regulatory status. So this map is really just showing the status of deregulation as far as electricity is concerned. For natural gas, basically all markets are deregulated. Of course, munis and co-ops don't have to participate. So it's usually a matter of whether or not you consume enough to meet a threshold requirement or whether or not you consume enough of natural gas to make it economical. But otherwise, as far as electricity is concerned, about 1/3 of the U.S. is deregulated. And you can see if you take a look over on the West Coast where you've got a lot of these quasi-deregulated or partially deregulated states, within those states, and maybe California is a good example of where it's deregulated, but you have to enroll, and there's a lottery to enroll, and it's become very difficult to enroll. So if you're not on direct access, then it's, you may not be able to anytime soon. But if you look at Oregon, for instance, this is a market that's, partially deregulated, hasn't historically been economical. Well, we find with certain, load profiles and rate classes, it's highly, economical to buy on third party versus the utility there. So this is really just to show that all of the gray area makes up the regulated markets where, is going to make up the majority of your power spend. And that's where, some time and effort should be given to identifying maybe some of these alternate rates that are more economical, but at least looking at these time of use rate options where maybe if you're able to do something slightly within the site, maybe you qualify for a rate that's more economical, or maybe you can take better advantage of existing rates. And then the other point I wanted to make is we know that we are at historical lows in some markets for electricity, those that are most closely correlated to natural gas, but certainly with natural gas. And a lot of munis and co-ops, of course, don't participate in deregulation. And so now you're able to take advantage of when the current market is low, but you're not able to take advantage of a future low market. So one thing I would recommend to everyone is to engage their munis and co-ops to see if you can create transparency, one, but two, gain the ability to potentially take advantage of future NYMEX prices by piggybacking their supply agreements with suppliers. We've been pretty successful in doing this historically to where you can lock in and hedge to some degree through the muni or co-op's physical suppliers. So that's just something to sort of think about when you want and would like to take advantage of what you think is a buying opportunity. And then next, I'm just showing really sort of a snapshot sample situation of how you can proactively, purchase your energy. And I'm using the Texas electric market, or ERCOT, to demonstrate this, primarily because the ERCOT market is closely correlated with NYMEX and natural gas future prices, just because there's so much natural gas fired generation, in this market. So you could really sort of apply this to both commodities. But if you'll take a look at that top blue line, that's really showing if you've locked into an electric agreement, let's say that's a 2-year agreement, and it's effective January of 2014 and runs through January of 2016. If you would have, if you're monitoring the market, you notice, a year later you're halfway into your agreement, but that price is not even remotely competitive to what's going on in the market now. So that creates a buying opportunity for you. That's a good opportunity to say, you know what, I can either, because if you look at the red line, that represents 2016, and each line represents a future year up to 2020. But in January of 2015, you could say, okay, I can either go ahead and extend out for 2016 at about $7 less per megawatt hour than I'm locked into, or I can actually look at averaging down my current price through, a blend and extend option to where, maybe you pick up $4 to $5 per megawatt hour, and that equates to $40,000 to $50,000 per year for every 10,000 megawatt hours. And then if you take it a step further and say, okay, well, I've locked in through 2016 because I took advantage of that buying opportunity. As we sit here today, you're really in the same situation. So the market's down for future years considerably, and you've got the opportunity maybe to average down your price another $3, $4, or extend out into the future knowing that that future price is advantageous relative to history. So that's just a quick sample of how you might or how you should constantly monitor the market, kind of understand your current contract structure, and I would also say make sure you understand the relationship you have with your provider or consultant if you have one. Meaning, if you're working with a broker, and I define broker as someone who will help you with a one-time RFP or sourcing event, you need to make sure that you're aligned, because if that's the case, then the goal is to get you the best possible price based on a snapshot in time, but it's not to continue monitoring on your behalf and look for that next buying opportunity. I mean, the reality is once that deal is done, then brokers get paid through the suppliers, and that sometimes is a motivating factor as opposed to being independent and unbiased, maybe being paid through an ongoing fixed fee where you're aligned in terms of always wanting to do what's in the best interest of the client. So I just wanted to kind of point that out as a consideration. And then finally, just to touch briefly on the demand side of things, we sort of take the approach of let's optimize the supply side. Let's reduce your cost. If we have a price risk management strategy, that's kind of know how far we're sort of hedged or locked into the future, because then you're better able to analyze, demand side or energy efficiency projects in terms of the economics. And so the way we typically go about doing that and recommend it is we kind of take a look at the portfolio and we let certain criteria sort of drive that decision with the client. That is, one, if you have your arms around your energy spend, you know what your cost per units are behind these various utilities. You know the demand rates and the structure of them, so you're highly penalized if you operate during on-peak periods and so forth. And then we couple that with any incentives and rebates available by those utilities, as well as whatever the company's financial return criteria is. So once you're able to start kind of targeting the sites that can best benefit, then you can start tying that to providers who might be sort of best in class in their discipline. So just to give you a quick example, we have a client that's a national auto parts retailer with 2,000 retail locations, 100 distribution centers, and a number of manufacturing sites through a couple of different divisions. So by kind of taking a look at all this criteria, pulling all that data together, we just immediately went out to start targeting low-hanging fruit and those projects that provided the best return. So what that amounted to was immediately going out to California and implement battery storage projects behind a few utilities that are subsidizing them. And it required no capital cost because the provider would do it through a lease, but the savings generated was 3 times greater than that of the lease. So it's highly cash flow positive, made a lot of sense there. Another example is we identified some incentives offered by Mid-American, for instance, in the state of Iowa, where we implemented a number of LED lighting retrofits whereby the utility funded, in most cases, up to 70% of the cost, and the paybacks were somewhere between 1 and 2 years. So there are, of course, other kind of targeted opportunities like that, but the data in this criteria really helps point you in the right direction. For the manufacturers and those that are a lot more energy intensive, of course, you look at cogen and you look at fuel cell and heat recovery projects and much more complex ideas, but generally that's the sort of approach that we sort of recommend, and that really once again allows you to kind of complete the cycle on an end-to-end integrated supply and demand side energy management program. So with that being said, Pierre, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you to see if there are any comments, questions, or any other input.
Yeah, Tommy, thanks. I've been scratching a bunch of things down here as you've been chatting. So, I mean, one of the things that strikes me is, this really is a portfolio kind of level approach around just lots of projects, and particularly as you have a large, let's say, a client that has a big footprint, in lots of different states. That's almost going to shape right there, a bunch of kind of market basket opportunities that you can have. It's not like you're just sourcing, one big, project. So, and when I think about portfolio management, I think about a money manager managing a portfolio versus a broker, as you said, who's interested in the commission. And one of the things that struck me was kind of, like in logistics or MRO, where you have 3PLs or 4PLs that may also own the assets, and also MRO vendors, that have integrated supply arms that, say that they're going to manage, objectively, yet they're owned by the actual supply chain. It seems like that's been happening a lot here in energy, around some of the energy management suppliers getting bought out by the energy companies. I mean, is that something, I've only seen it kind of anecdotally, is that something that's definitely been happening, and has it kind of had an impact on, what you've been doing kind of day to day with clients, and just any observations or things to watch out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big consideration as you decide who to partner with to make sure that you're aligned. So, good, here's a couple of examples that's occurred in the last couple of years. So if you look at what was the largest sort of independent, unbiased consulting firm, if you look at Summit, they were acquired by Schneider. Schneider's more of a controls and equipment, manufacturer, and so so you have to kind of figure out, okay, what's the priority? Is it maybe to focus more on the equipment controls, or is it to truly, in a very independent way, optimize the procurement of energy? Acova was acquired by Suez, so Suez is a supplier, of energy, so that's something to think about. Trane acquired Fellon McCord, Siemens acquired Pace Global. So there's been a lot of consolidation in the industry, and at the end of the day, is it better to work with one provider that can provide you anything and everything that you need? Well, maybe in some cases, what we like to think is that it's better to work with those that are best in class in each discipline, but most importantly, independent and unbiased, working in the best interest of the client. So those are just, some considerations as we go through all this consolidation.
Yeah, that in its own right is kind of its own form of, hedging. So yeah, if you have a big incumbent that you're using, certainly use them, but also, if you need to look at something more strategically across lots of levers, maybe it's best to to kind of pull in another resource to look under some different stones.
Sure.
And speaking, I was just thinking about hedging. Hedging is something that kind of is a longer term view, and one of the things you didn't chat about as much because you can't cover the entire world in actually for 20 minutes, not even 30 minutes, but the area around sustainability and renewables and. Is this something that you think can be used? Is this something that cannot just be used to, hey, we need to, do something in sustainability, or, are there enough, rebates and opportunities where, you can do some, projects that are meaningful, projects and not just the super quick, quick implementations, but are there, definitely some opportunities to take a look at here that can drive out some cost?
Yeah, I think it ultimately depends on what your goal is and what success means to you. So we, often have these conversations, and sustainability means something different to, depending on who you're talking to. But in most cases, companies are only wanting to do those things that are economically, feasible and make sense, and very few are looking for sort of the advertising and marketing, benefit. So just a couple of examples, though, is even in the, if you're looking at renewables, for instance, there are a number of suppliers who are automatically going to include a certain portion of their supply in renewables, but either, you're not aware of it or you are, they are willing to issue, more or less, certificates that sort of prove it, that you can display and that sort of thing. But otherwise, there are lots of, other programs that make a lot of economic sense. I know that solar's been sort of an area of interest for a lot of companies, but we're just kind of completing, a study, of course, out in California where, one client is historically paying 16, 17 cents per kilowatt hour, and, we're looking at an alternative of around 9 cents, through a 20-year PPA, so you've got to meet that requirement. But I think there are lots of renewable sort of opportunities out there, available to you that are economical.
Yeah, no, you're right. And even just when you were showing the cost, kind of the curve, the cost curve, and just looking at that peak versus off peak, and just some of the technology advances around, the battery management, storage, systems and things like that. Definitely seems like there's a lot of innovation going on. So I think it's good to tap into that. So, all right. Well, Sheena, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and let's see if there's some questions out there that the audience has had. I've seen there's a couple, so I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, yeah. So if you have any questions for Pierre or Tommy, please go ahead and enter them into the Q&A now. And we've gotten several iterations of this one question, so I'm going to kind of blob it all into one. So are existing spend and savings analysis tools that are out there right now, are they good enough for managing energy, or do you need something specialized?
Well, so, that's a kind of a loaded question, because there are degrees of tools available that will allow you to, create more savings and results. So, we go back to, at a minimum, there should be some sort of energy information system, information management system, at a minimum that captures historically data. So that's your typical, utility bill processing solution, like your, Capturus or CAS and, even Acova and some of the rest out there. But then you kind of, you can take it to the next level. So we're actually working with a number of clients now to install, software solutions that will, communicate to existing, building automated systems that are already in place. And we're really, by having that kind of access to real-time information coupled with the utility rate structure and kind of what's going on there, then of course that's a better tool to drive out and identify more sustainable savings, on a go-forward basis. So there's always sort of a better tool out there, but it all comes down to whether or not, you can economically kind of justify utilizing it. So I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but I think that kind of covers it.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen, to both Pierre and Tommy for being here, and thank you especially to our audience. We put these things on for you. So if you do have any other questions, you'll see both Pierre and Tommy's email addresses up there on the screen. And if we did not get to your question today, we try to respect everyone's time. So check back on SpendMatters in the next week or so. If it's a kind of a broader topic, we'll write a blog post on it, or we'll reach out to you personally to make sure that we be sure to cover everything that you were hoping to get from today's session. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you on our next webinar soon.
Thanks, everyone.